Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a massive paradigm shift in the world of artificial intelligence. We're going to explore a new, decentralized engine called ADEPT. It's basically designed to take AI back from the cloud monopolies and put it right onto your local machine. Let's get right into it.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going to cover the sovereign AI paradigm, how ADT actually works locally, its universal ingestion pipeline, the peer-to-peer swarm fabric, who this is built for, and finally, how it's completely disrupting cloud AI.
All right, Section 1, the sovereign AI paradigm, breaking the cloud monopoly. The source material sets up a really stark contrast here. On one side, you've got traditional cloud AI. We all know it, you pay subscription fees, there's absolute data surveillance, and you're stuck in perpetual vendor lock-in. But on the other side is the ADEPT Sovereign AI model. This is built for 100% local execution. It runs completely offline, and there are literally zero recurring costs. The whole philosophy centers around this idea of sovereign intelligence. That means the AI is owned, controlled, and operated entirely by you. Because ADP processes everything right there on your device, entirely offline, there are no API keys, no cloud telemetry, nothing. Your data never leaves your machine. This native offline setup guarantees absolute data privacy, which means it automatically complies with super strict privacy laws like HIPAA for medical data and GDPR right out of the box. Moving on to Section 2, how ADPET works locally, under the hood. Now, usually running local open source AI requires a PhD in DevOps. It's incredibly complicated, but the documentation shows ADEPT uses this really clever smart installer to automate the whole thing. It does a hidden hardware analysis, so it checks your CPU for specific architectures like AVX512, detects if you're running a dedicated NVIDIA or Intel Xe GPU, and profiles your RAM. Then it dynamically generates a custom configuration to automatically squeeze out the absolute maximum performance for your specific setup. Here's where the math really dictates what you can physically run. By compressing massive language models using something called INT4 quantization, basically 4-bit integers, the hardware requirements drop dramatically. A massive 70 billion parameter model? Yeah, still impossible on a standard 16GB laptop. A 7 billion parameter model will technically run, but it's going to be pretty slow. However, the 1.4 billion parameter model, that is the sweet spot. It runs at an interactive speed while only using about 3.2 gigabytes of your total RAM. In fact, that 1.4 billion parameter mark is known as the sovereign limit. According to the sources, it's the absolute largest AI model that you can fully own, fine-tune yourself using a method called QLoRa, and operate entirely disconnected from the internet on standard, everyday consumer hardware. All right, let's look at Section 3, the universal ingestion pipeline, the black hole for data. So how does this engine actually learn all your proprietary data without sending it to a cloud server? Enter the zero-copy knowledge store. The documentation points out that traditional tokenizers can be pretty brittle and crash on messy data. So ADEPT actually bypasses that and processes raw UTF-8 bytes directly. It pushes those bytes into a centralized Apache Arrow database. Think of it as a super efficient memory buffer that lets the AI read your private data in literal microseconds without ever creating duplicate copies. To put that into perspective, this zero-copy architecture massively reduces memory overhead. If you look at a traditional RAG system, that's retrieval augmented generation, it might duplicate data all over the place, needing a 31 gigabyte memory footprint just for a 10 gigabyte data corpus. But ADEPT's zero-copy store shrinks that footprint down to just 12.4 gigabytes. That is a staggering 60% reduction in memory waste. And that's exactly why you can store and query massive document sets right on highly constrained hardware. And the types of data you can feed it? You can literally just drop entire folders of mixed media right into a local directory. ADEPT unzips Word and LibreOffice documents on the fly. It uses built-in Tesseract OCR to read text straight out of your photos and scans. It even uses local Whisper AI to transcribe your audio and video files. It acts like a giant vacuum, converting all that unstructured data into semantic embeddings locally, without a single byte ever touching the internet. Let's jump to Section 4, the P2P Swarm Fabric, horizontal scaling. Now, here's a really fascinating question. How does standard laptops connect to each other across the internet to scale operations if there is absolutely no central cloud server routing the traffic? The answer lies in ADP's Decentralized Swarm Knowledge Fabric, which is built entirely on peer-to-peer networking. If laptops are on the same Wi-Fi, they find each other instantly using local protocols like MDNS. Globally, it uses bootstrap nodes to find an initial list of peers and then routes traffic through a distributed hash table, basically a decentralized address book. It even has this brilliant trick called hole punching to bypass strict enterprise firewalls, letting completely remote nodes sync their knowledge securely. Once they're connected, the knowledge scales out horizontally using something called the gossip subprotocol. Rather than sending heavy, full files back and forth, a node just securely gossips a cryptographic Merkle root hash. Think of it as a tiny, secure receipt that proves a verified fact. It sends this to its closest peers, who then pass it to more peers, rippling this new knowledge exponentially across the swarm to create a living, collective intelligence. Okay, Section 5. Who is ADEPT for? The sovereign user. So, who actually needs to ditch the convenience of cloud AI for this hardcore local setup? The documentation points to operators guarding highly sensitive information. We're talking privacy-first professionals, like lawyers and doctors dealing with strict HIPAA data. Unplugged operatives, like journalists who need to bypass state censorship. Enterprise sovereignists, like CSOs fighting internal data leaks. It's also perfect for field researchers working with zero internet access, and frugal startups who just want to avoid massive ongoing cloud computing bills. Now, as for the software itself, the ADEPT code is completely transparent, reproducible, and released under the permissive open-source Apache 2.0. But there's a catch. The documentation makes it clear that it includes a really strict ethical use clause. This legally prohibits the technology from being used for mass surveillance, identity-based persecution, or autonomous weapons. Finally, Section 6, Disrupting the Cloud AI Macroeconomic Impact. Let's zoom out a bit. Right now, centralized AI company valuations basically assume that AI has to be rented out as a cloud utility, meaning endless recurring API fees. But think about it. If enterprises suddenly realize they can get 80% of their AI utility completely locally with zero recurring costs using a system like ADEPT, that entire business model is in trouble. ADEPT essentially takes AI from being a premium cloud service and commoditizes it into a free, local utility powered by your own personal hardware. Macroeconomically, this sets up a fascinating shift. Cloud API vendors like Microsoft and Google could face serious downward margin pressure because they lose out on that recurring revenue. On the flip side, Meta is seen as a massive beneficiary here because free open source AI makes their internal ad targeting way cheaper. And hardware OEMs? Companies like Dell and Apple are incredibly bullish. Why? Because sovereign AI is going to spark a massive hardware upgrade cycle as everyone rushes to buy laptops with enough RAM to run these models. There's a quote from Clive Gerald Aldred, the lead researcher for the project, that really sums this all up. He says, "Centralized AI is a weapon waiting to be captured. Trust no single authority." It perfectly captures the core ethos driving this entire architecture. So here is the ultimate question this explainer leaves us with. In a future defined by artificial intelligence, will you continue to rent your intelligence or will you choose to own it? It's a huge concept to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today, and keep learning.